everybody. Welcome to InPsightRadio. I am your host, Danielle Egnew, and you are a fly on the wall too everywhere. What is it like to just look behind the psychic scenes and see all this stuff? It's pretty cool, right? I mean, I'd ask myself what it's like, but that's just what it's like for me. So I'll just share it with you. How is that, gang? That's awesome. Hey, listen, I really want to thank everybody who has been writing some wonderful comments and some heartfelt letters that I've been receiving in my inbox at my website at contact@danielleegnew-advisor.com, as well as leaving comments on Facebook, as well as leaving comments on our Patreon subscription site where you guys get these broadcasts first. And just wonderful comments about how much everybody enjoys the podcasts. And it's been so much fun, and it's been quite a dance with getting the podcasts out there with the Road Angel production schedule. And I'm enjoying doing this so much. And one of the things that I love is hearing about what you guys want to hear about. You know, I have 150 million different things that these angels will have me talk about. And they are not at a loss, let me tell you, for things that they want me to talk to the world about. Yet it's wonderful when I get the opportunity to hear from you guys and you gals and everybody who doesn't even associate with the gender, all you people, about what it is that you feel is important to hear about. Now, on one of our last podcasts, I was making an allusion to how much we were polluting our environment and how much we were polluting big underground groupings of water. I mean, we were polluting the heck out of it. And how our Middle Earth community probably didn't appreciate that because who even knows what's down there, et cetera, and so on. Well, I had a couple of listeners write in after I made that comment and said, you know, we would love a podcast on Middle Earth. Like, what is there? Is anything there? What is it? And I've actually done quite a bit of not only research, but quite a bit of work in the area of, is the idea of Middle Earth, you know, like the Hobbit or the J.R.R. Tolkien world, is it real? So today's podcast is there actually a Middle Earth? Because I was actually really quite surprised by the number of people who wrote in and said, oh my God, you mentioned Middle Earth. What's the deal with it? Is it real? What's going on there? You know, gang, when we think of Middle Earth, I think before we even get into this podcast, for the bulk of it, I think it's important to recognize that when we think of Middle Earth, we're thinking of, again, the Hobbit. We're thinking of our idea of a fantasy world, of Game of Thrones, of some place that miraculously exists beneath the crust of the earth, but between the molten core of the earth and the crust, that somehow, and we're not exactly sure how, gets sunlight down there, or maybe, you know, it's refracted core energy or something, but like dinosaurs are trapped down there in caverns, and, you know, it always has this sunlight somehow. And I always crack up because whenever we have Middle Earth mythology, the sun is shining in the sky. So, you know, do we have an internal sun within the earth? What is it? Is the core the sun for the middle of the earth? What is it? Well, the Middle Earth that we would think exists on a physical level, hobbits and orcs and all kinds of crazy trolls and elves on a physical level with the sun shining in the sky, that's not exactly what's down there, okay, or in there, I should say. However, we do have a Middle Earth. It's just not what we think it looks like. We keep trying to create a Middle Earth that looks like freaking New Zealand in a helicopter shot of the finale of Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones. I mean, this is how we see a fantasy Earth. So it's important to note that, yes, is there a Middle Earth? Absolutely there is. And I'm going to tell you what it looks like and what's down there and all those things. However, it's not what we think it is, okay? So you have to consider, gang, that the top crust of the earth is anywhere between 10,000 feet to 20,000 feet thick. Now, there are places where it's thinner and there's places where it's thicker. But that outer crust is the part that's hardened on top of a series of caverns that are deep within the gaseous heat pockets in our planet. And so we do have middle pockets, humongous caverns, huge caverns. I mean, monstrously huge, that are full of monstrously large crystalline content, because crystals grow where there's heat variation, where there's pressure variation, and where there are certain gases. And I want you to consider that if you looked in the center of the earth, what you have is we think, science thinks it's a big ball of iron, like an iron core somehow that's surrounded by some kind of magma, and all of that's swirling around. And of course, that's how this iron core of the earth is what creates the magnetism of the earth. Well, now obviously no one's been to the core of the earth. The only thing that's been to the core of the earth have been radioactive devices, nuclear cores that have melted down. And they call it a meltdown, you guys, in case you've always wondered what a meltdown was, gang. A meltdown is literally when a nuclear reactor gets so hot that it melts. There is protective layering underneath of a nuclear reactor. And if you want to see how all this works, watch the series Chernobyl. They did a mini series called Chernobyl, and it was brilliant. And for those of us that lived through Chernobyl, through that time frame in the 80s, man, that was such a well done show, down to the costumes and everybody smoking inside. And I mean, it was so good. It was really, really creepy about what actually happened in Russia with Chernobyl. And you learn a lot about the nuclear technology. So in a meltdown, they have these Teflon pads and all kinds of different ceramic tiles that can be superheated to hundreds, if not thousands of degrees before they fail. But the thing about non-disturbed nuclear energy is it gets so hot, they have to keep cooling down the nuclear rods because there's nothing that can cool them down. Once they start resonating and generating electricity and generating energy, actually, and then we harness the energy and make it electrical. Once they're dancing doing the neutron dance, once they're doing the neutron dance, you can't cool them down. And they just get hotter and 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 hotter until they actually melt the floor beneath them, until the compounds themselves are just reactive balls of heat, and they keep melting down. They melt through the core of the earth. They melt all the way down till they hit the core of the earth. That's what a meltdown is. Seriously. So in Fukushima, when Japan was hit by the earthquake, what was that, back in 2011? And moved the island of Japan 9 feet west. That's how big that tsunami was. And when Fukushima melted down, there's still probably that Fukushima reactor heading straight down to the core of the earth because it's so hot. It melts every single thing underneath of it, including stone, including alloys, including engineered alloys and tiles that would keep it from melting. I mean, it just keeps going. So, the core of the earth is exceptionally hot, and it probably, I'm guessing, would eat a nuclear reactor. And I'm guessing also that within the dynamic nuclear activity in the center of the earth, it probably spits a reactor out for lunch like a piece of tuna fish between its teeth. There's so much energy in there. So you have to consider how much earth there is. And there are miles and miles of earth between the surface of the earth and what we detect as the core. So when we talk about, things like Middle Earth, what we're talking about is life and different types of life and what can live in non-sun generating caverns. Now, science has gone down as far as they can go. And we've got a lot of black ops science. We have a lot of science that is not released to the public and that is categorized in Pentagon papers. That the Pentagon papers are, they're budgets for black ops under the table military programs. And I talk about this all the time, that our joint chiefs don't even have access to. So the president, whomever is the president of the United States, has no idea what's going on in these privatized military industrial complexes that are actually being funded by tax dollars and being laundered through the Pentagon. Now, those types of organizations have gone farther down into the core of the earth than anybody else because they are able to reverse engineer off-world technology. And I'll say this till I'm blue in the face. If you see triangular UFOs, we've built those. Okay, we built the triangles. We're not quite sure. We're getting better with ovals. We're not quite sure how to do a perfect circle. We've got some discs that we've reverse engineered. However, we have learned how to move some space-time. So we have learned how to dematerialize a ship and rematerialize it somewhere else. Now, the thing of it is, we have to do that on the planet Earth. We've not learned how to harness with our reverse engineered UFO technology. We've not learned how to harness the types of energies to be able to go across the universe because we are still relying on the electromagnetic output of the planet Earth to get the reverse engineered type of technology that we were able to create that we fit inside of these reverse engineered, we're just going to call them the triangular spaceships. We still need a lot more power than we are capable of generating or understand how to generate in order to do what we want to do with these craft. So we're kind of popping all over the earth, but we mostly stay within the earth. I think I was catching some of our craft. I do a lot of psychic scanning, for the lack of a better way to put it. And I talk to my off-world friends. I talk to these angels all the time about what we're actually up to because I'm just curious. And we've gotten to the point where we can jump depending on, are you ready for this? Depending on how close the moon is to the earth, it will create certain magnetic indexes that with the limited type of propulsion that we have in these triangular craft, we can jump to certain parts of the moon and back, but only if the moon is in a certain place at a certain time of year. And if there is any upper atmospheric disturbance or outer atmospheric disturbance with the sun, solar flares, coronal mass ejections, any of that, well, then that's off the table because that's going to completely screw up our limited understanding of how to actually manipulate space-time and vortexes. So no matter how much we noodle and reverse engineer all this stuff, we're still working through the pea brains of humanity, people, okay? And no matter how much our off-world friends from Sirius AB or any of these other amazing places, Oturan, or any of these worlds, the Pleiades that come and help us on the earth, they really can't push us any faster than we can be pushed in terms of energy generation. Because some of the alloys that they use, they're not even present on the earth. Some of the ways that they can create the power driving mechanisms of these interdimensional craft for their own ships, they have so much energy that they can harness to create these very simple, they look like plexiglass panels that are dense with microspores in them that pull dark matter, and that's how they run. We don't even have the technology to be able to generate the power enough to compress the matter enough to make those things. So we're a ways off. So why did I go into UFOs? Well, because I'm a ufologist and I do that. But also because when we're talking about Middle Earth, we're talking about the fact that we have been to a majority, not all, but a lot of these really big cavern systems below the earth. And it's interesting because, whenever we have like a journey to the center of the earth super show, and in those super shows, there's always a cavern and it's 1,000,000 degrees and there's super huge crystals and blah, blah, blah. Well, we've drawn from what we've actually seen closer to the top of the earth. There are huge crystal caverns in North Dakota, in Mexico. I mean, these crystal caverns are so big that people go down into them and the crystals themselves are harnessing geomagnetic energy, electromagnetic energy. They are huge. Like when I say huge, I want you to think of a 4-story tall quartz crystal, like something you would see out of a 1960s middle of the earth dinosaur movie. Okay. And just like the crystal you'd wear around your neck, with the 6-point on top. And some of these are the size of Volkswagen buses. Some of these are several stories tall. And these crystalline caves that are close to the surface of the earth, gang, they're really hot. I mean, they're like 150 degrees in there because the crystals, all of that quartz crystal creates a resonation and it traps energy and it off-puts energy. Okay? So, why am I talking about this? Well, because those crystal caves were actually developed way miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles underneath of the earth. And over time, all of the earth's crust gets pushed upwards. You know, the tops of the mountains are the oldest parts of the continents because at one time they were all under the ocean. So, you know, Mother Earth continues to eat itself and continues to create magma and continues to push upward. So these caverns that now seem like they're on the surface, they're not actually, I mean, they are surface caverns now. They didn't used to be. They were deep in the earth and they've rotated over time towards the top of the earth. So we do know that there are massive crystal caverns still. And the other way we know that is when I'm communicating with these offworlders about how they get in and out of the earth. Because we're talking about, is Middle Earth society real? Well, in order for me to talk about that, I have to tell you what's down there first. That's why we're going here, okay? So when we talk about these giant crystal caverns, the offworlders that I chat with, a lot of them from Sirius and a lot of them are Oturan, Arcturian, as many of you know that name. And they focus on traveling through these humongous caverns. Some of the entry spaces of these caverns, the way they describe it to me, is 2 and 3 and sometimes even 4 times as big as our largest football stadium. You know, their largest amphitheater, if you want to call it that, within these caverns, chamber, is massive. And then what's lining those caverns are not just Volkswagen bus-sized crystals or not even 4-story sized crystals. I mean, the kind of crystals that should be, truthfully, in some kind of Marvel movie, you know, where you've got like a 25-story crystal and the hero's a little dot standing on top of the crystal, and we pan out into the crystal cavern and they're all purple and green and beautiful and whatever. That's actually what's down there. And most of them are clear quartz crystals because of the type of pressure. Now they've got ones that are amethyst. They've got green, almost like a sapphire-y looking type of crystal, but it's green. And it looks more like a quartz crystal, so it's not actually a sapphire. And it's massive. And the reason that these UFOs come and go from these particular crystal caverns is because the energy that is harnessed in there is insane. Our planet is a series of vortexes. And we surface dwellers, we have no freaking idea the wealth that's underneath of our feet. You know, we're all up here freaking out about the climate, and rightfully so. Yet there is a vast ecosystem below the crust of this earth that is massive. And these crystals, not only are they huge, not only do they create a vortex that massive ships, you know, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of feet across, can materialize in. Some of these caverns are so huge, you've got ships that are miles across that actually, well, they appear in the center of the earth, not in the center, but in these big pockets. And they use that as a jump point to go to the middle of the sun. And from the middle of the sun, they take off out of our universe. I mean, we have unbelievable ecosystems that, you know, we've gotten to some of them in our craft. Some of these crystal caverns underneath, as I've been not only researching geology over the many, many years, but also, you know, just doing reading and also speaking with these beings that live down there and come and go from there all the time. A lot of times we can't send our little triangle craft there because the energy that's generated in these massive spaces of the earth, it's like a massive microwave oven. I mean, it'll just cook anything that gets in there. And we are working on cloaking technology with our little Dorito UFOs. And we're working on all kinds of things, yet we still don't have the power to thwart the power of the earth, as opposed to our off-world friends that when they're down there and they actually materialize these massive ships, they can shift the energy because they understand how to use that sort of very compressed resonant energy, and they just kind of suck it up and they charge their batteries in there and they take off and off they go. So we are unable to do the same thing because we simply cannot withstand that much, not only focused electromagnetic energy, yet the heat is intense. The bigger, those crystals give off a lot of heat. Have you ever held a crystal and it gets hot in your hand? And you're like, oh my God, this is the crystal for me. It's talking to me from Atlantis. I must buy this crystal. Well, all crystals have a pulse. They all have a pulse, which is why you've heard of crystal watches, right? Those crystals have a natural pulse to them, and they keep the time device, they keep it on time. And they grow crystals. NASA grows crystals, and now SpaceX and all these other extraplanetary entrepreneurs grow crystals in outer space because the more clear the crystal, the more amazingly precise it can actually focus light and energy. And in a gravity-based environment, it's just natural that there's going to be what's called inclusions in the crystal, okay? And the inclusions are like just little bitty blemishes, for lack of a better way to put it, or little cloudy spots. And sometimes they're microscopic. But when you're dealing with a crystal crystals are made of lots and lots of sheets of matter, okay? And if those sheets are like, imagine stacking perfectly starched white sheets. They're so starched, there's not even a wrinkle in them. And you can stack them one on top of the other. Pretty soon you've got a stack of sheets, that's a foot thick. Now it's going to weigh a ton because each sheet is perfectly starched, but it's perfectly flat. So that's kind of what a crystal is. It's micro layers of this crystalline content. And if you grow them in space, you can grow them so each layer is perfectly starched and flat and doesn't have one little micro wrinkle in it. And then if you're using them in lasers, which we use those space-grown crystals and lasers, then they are amazing and they focus light a lot more accurately. So when we're talking about these deep, deep crystals that grow, they're growing in gases in Middle Earth. They're massively huge. They're growing in a lot of pressure under the earth. And so the nature of the pressure and the gas also takes out some of the inclusions. Now they do have inclusions in them, but they have less inclusions than the types of crystal that would form, in wet caves above on the surface of the earth where, you're going to have water running through that crystalline content. And a lot of times crystals develop in watery areas. So as you can see, Middle Earth and what it is a giant energy generator. And there is so much energy down there that we can't get down there because we've not really been able to withstand the pressure of it, the energy of it. And we do have shielding and cloaking technology in these Black Ops Pentagon's programs. We do. Yet still, we don't have enough to protect us down there. So we know it's there. We've sent drone craft in it that we can't get out, that have just basically been eaten by that environment. And some of it we can't get to at all. And so when I talk to the beings that go there on a regular basis, what we have in a lot of these superstructures under the earth, we do have some trapped prehistoric life that has wildly adapted and would not even look like anything that we could recognize. There are light sources. These aren't all dark caverns. There are light sources. Just like we have bioluminescent creatures that are present in the ocean, there are bioluminescent forms of what looks like lichen. Have you ever seen lichen on a piece of granite? When I look at this stuff and when I'm shown this stuff by my off-world friends and by these angels, it literally looks like lichen. So imagine taking spray paint that glows in the dark and spraying it over everything. So everything is glowing. And this type of lichen, or if you want to call it, it's almost like an algae. This algae stuff has this opportunity, and we're talking the deep caverns in the earth. It actually eats this energy that comes out of the crystals. It fortifies itself in the heat, and there are microbes down there, and there are microorganisms that this very, very limited life form can eat. So there have been animals that have been trapped down there, very large if you want to call them, let's go back to Greece. Let's go back to Greece and let's talk about the Titans. The Titans that lived so far under the earth that if they ever came up, they would be cataclysmic. I love mythology because within mythology is always a little bit of truth sprinkled in there. And that's how it gets started. And there are massive creatures that dwell in these spaces that, again, have developed a way of eating and being that they don't eat on our same cycles. They don't require the same light we do. The chances that they're going to come crashing up through the core of the earth and from the crust of the earth is very low because they require a ton of heat to live. They require a lot of pressure to live. It's one of the reasons we never see giant squid in the ocean because those animals, they live at unbelievable amounts of pressure at the very bottom of these Mariana Trench areas. And the Mariana Trench is so deep, gang. I mean, we can't even get our brain around Middle Earth because we can't get our brain around how deep that is. Okay? Now, let me give you an idea. At the very bottom of the Mariana Trench, way out there in the middle of the ocean, you can take the highest mountain that we have, Mount Everest, which is 20,000 and some change feet tall, and plop it to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Are you ready for this? And you're still going to have 2 miles of water on top of that mountain. Okay? So that's just the bottom of the ocean. And we haven't even broken the crust of the earth yet. So I want you to really envision how much pressure is down in Middle Earth, because that Middle Earth pressure is unbelievable. Now, again, there are humongous methane pockets that have created these huge caverns. And in these caverns are ecosystems. And in those ecosystems is water. And there's a lot of water that by the time it gets down there, it's filtered the heck out of itself. So when we're pumping our fracking crap into underground aquifers that are 10,000 feet below us, we're considering that to be, whatever. It's so deep that we'll never use it. And the water down there for us is brackish because that water is leaching all of that deep mineral content of all the rocks out. So it hasn't had a chance to hit the streams. It hasn't had the chance to oxygenate. It hasn't had the chance to really become water that we'd want to drink because it hasn't made its way up to the surface yet. And a lot of it just stays down there. So we pump our crap into this brackish water going, you know what? So what? It's so far below us, nobody uses that. Except we have zero concept of what so far below us actually means, okay? So let me just give you a real super quick rundown of this, okay? Because we're surface dwellers. The crust of the earth is literally it's super thin, gang. It's literally like the skin of an apple. That's how thin it is. It's ridiculous. And we make it all about living on the skin of the apple. I mean, oh my God. And when our climate changes, the skin of the apple gets brown, it gets whatever, it peels itself, it grows another skin, but it's only the skin of the whole planet. It's like a sunburn peeling and then just getting a new set of skin. It's fine. If we're living on the peel while it's peeling, it gets a little rough. So let me explain this to you here. So we live in the crust of the earth, and that's really only about 60 miles, okay? And that's from, they call it the lithosphere. And that's pretty much, you got your ocean, you got your mountains, you got a bunch of crap beneath that. So we're pumping this junk that we're drilling for oil. We're drilling for oil in the lithosphere, okay? And all of this crust, we're at the very, very top, just that top. Now, then you get down to the asthenosphere, and that's about 430 miles below the 60 miles that's below the crust, okay? So when we're talking about going down 10,000 feet, We're certainly not talking going down 430 miles, but a lot of the caverns and a lot of the Middle Earth life that we think exists or that we want to talk about is in that asthenosphere. So it's still way down there. It's 430 miles down, and there are some of the smaller crystal caverns there. You have a lot of ecosystems there, which again, don't exactly have a shining sunshine, but they do have water. They have clean water that runs through there because that's the water that's circulating down to that level of the earth is not even necessarily getting up to the level of the earth. There are lakes, there are rivers, there are deep pockets of water that are so far down on our planet that are being utilized by the elemental kingdom down there. We're going to talk fairies in just a second, and elves. It doesn't look like we think it looks in Lord of the Rings because, again, gang, no sunshine. Okay, it's not like they've built a system of mirrors down in the asthenosphere at 430 miles below the 60-mile lithosphere, which is below the crust of the ocean. Okay, are you following this? Well, then, once you get down into the asthenosphere, then you go into the mesosphere, and that's about 1,800 miles at its biggest depth there. And that's 1,800 miles straight down into the ground. So we're talking thousands of miles beneath of us. And that is what's called, and in the mesosphere, the asthenosphere and the lithosphere, and that whole little area, is called the mantle. So the crust is the apple skin, and those three layers that I told you about, one's 60 miles, one's 430 miles, and one's 1,800 miles. That is all called the mantle. And that mostly is where our Middle Earth life lives. And I'll tell you, as you get closer and closer to the bottom of the mantle and the mesosphere, you're starting to hit the liquid part of the earth, which they call the core. And so it gets hotter and hotter as you get to the very bottom of that. Yet some of the largest crystalline caverns that I have been shown to exist are, through the psychic sphere, really literally are just within miles of that 1,800-mile boundary because they're up against, again, they're catching the gases that are coming off of the core of the earth. And so the life that's down there, there are massive creatures that live down there, and there are massive, if you want to call it underground oceans, there are huge bodies of water under there with, again, bioluminescent beings. I want you to think of life that's at the very bottom of the ocean, all that weird-looking space life with the see-through fish and whatnot. There's a lot of that life down there, and it's intense, and there's a lot of internal fire or flame or magma that pops up. And so you've got the glow of these flames. So the life that's in there can withstand massive amounts of heat. And it just keeps getting hotter and hotter the closer you're going. And again, a lot of what we have living in these Middle Earth caverns, even in these Middle Earth oceans, we do have some massively huge, large creatures that we would consider titans if they ever came up to the surface of the earth. Now, they couldn't live on the surface of the earth. They would freeze on the surface of the earth. That portion of the earth is thick with methane gas. It's thick with gases. It's not like, oh, look at all this nice, healthy oxygen in the middle of the earth, down there in the mantle of the earth. That's not really there. Now, in some of these oxygenated areas, the water and the water molecules do create a larger oxygen pocket, but it's still very minimal compared to what we would be used to. So we have elemental creatures that live down there like crazy, because also whenever you have a lot of compressed earth, okay, and you have all of that geomagnetic pressure, you have all of that crystalline content, you also have precious metals. So there's a ton of iron and gold and nickel and silver and palladium and just pure energy conducting metals all over the place the closer you get to the core of the earth, because it's like it acts as a distillery with the pressure and with the way that these metals are made. So we've got huge vortexes that are open the closer you get to the core of the earth. And our elemental kingdom is able to exist not only on the apple skin of the crust of the earth, but they're able to exist in that mantle section. Most of them are kind of hanging in the asthenosphere. That's about 430 miles down. And it's not quite as hot there. And you do have really big caverns. And there's a lot of shallow, long extending oceans in those pockets. However, they do a lot of travel. And by elemental, if you want to think fairies, fae, a lot of weird looking things that never ever come to the surface of the earth because they need the heavy pressure to live. Just like we get squished like a bug if we go to the very bottom of the ocean. If we go into some of these places, once you're getting closer to the core of the earth, there is, if you're in a craft or something that's going to protect you from the pressure, that's great. Yet then these caverns are made to withstand the pressure, and they've been doing that for billions of years. A lot of the crystal latticing, that quartz crystal, the way it lattices together, and I've seen this time and time again. It's fascinating. I wish I could show this to all of you. It looks like a brick system that holds open the walls of the cavern. I mean, it's insane. These things look like something from a different planet, but it's the interior of our planet. So when we're talking about fae or elemental beings, they do come and go from surface level vortex points that you'll notice we create a lot of on the crust of the earth. We create a lot of those with stones. Like when you look at Lake Titicaca, which is up on the border of Peru and Bolivia in the Andes at about 14,000 feet. Lake Titicaca has a ton, I know, like we're all five, right? And we're making fun of that name in our head. Just go ahead and get it over with. Titicaca, Titicaca, Titicaca. There you go. Okay, moving on. So the Andes, of course, are one of the oldest mountain ranges in the world, and they're very, very tall. So the very top of the Andes are, of course, as we discussed earlier in the podcast, some of the most ancient places on the whole globe. And at Lake Titicaca up there at 14,000 feet is this thing they call the Door of the Gods. And it's said to have been a portal for a star prince who came through that particular doorway. And it's basically this red rock. So obviously it's got a ton of iron content in the rock. The rock is red, kind of a rusty red color. And there's a massive doorway that's carved in it. And then at the bottom of the doorway, it looks like a giant place to put a skeleton key. And the lore is that this star king came through it from another star region and accessed this stargate to go back to whatever star world this star being came from by taking a gold disc and placing it inside of this doorway, and that it would unlock it. Now, there's a little notch inside of the doorway, and everybody thinks the gold disc fit in that notch. And I'm here to tell you that I was consulting with some of my off-world friends. That entire cutout spot in this, and look it up. Look at it. Doorway to the Gods, Gateway to the Gods, Lake Titicaca. There's pictures all over Google. It's that weird looking it looks like a skeleton keyhole at the bottom. And that entire space at the bottom there had something inserted into it that would resonate and basically create with the iron in the rock. It would liquefy the rock, and it would liquefy it. It would break it down to tiny particles where you opened up a wormhole, basically. And you could walk through from that end and you'd end up in Sirius AB. And I was told by my off-world pals that the other side of that it's a Sirius-based technology. And that kind of falls into place because right about the time that they've dated the Gateway to the Gods up at Lake Titicaca, they also, circle that around to the building of the pyramids, which was also Sirius's contribution to us. There's a lot of stuff there. So anyway, it's very hard for me to talk about Middle Earth without talking about UFOs, because you cannot separate the fact that the vortexes that exist in Middle Earth are huge UFO hotspots. So we don't necessarily have hobbits down there, yet we do have living creatures down there, and a lot of them are off-worlders. A lot of our off-world cultures, gang, do far better in different types of atmospheres than we have, and far better in different kinds of pressures. And again, as you go into the Earth, it's heating up. So a lot of our off-world friends also do better in a consistent, hotter environment. A lot of the worlds in the Pleiades, for those Pleiadians that have not gone non-corporeal, because there's a lot of Pleiadians out there that don't need a body anymore. They've kind of grown past that space. A lot of the planets in the Pleiades are pretty even-tempered, but in terms of temperature, but they are, how do I put this? They're hot. We'd consider them really hot, and we consider the gravity very oppressive. So these beings do a little better down in that mantle than we would. And the closer that you get to that 1,800-mile deep, basically basement of the mesosphere, and in that mantle area, you're actually running into less and less life. You are running into lots of extraterrestrials because the caverns down there are just gigantic. I mean, just huge. And I have no idea why they don't collapse in on each other, except this was explained to me that the way that these crystals grow together literally brackets these caves. It creates a scaffolding for these huge pockets and these limestone caverns that are just, I can't even begin to tell you how big. I mean, it's like something that we'd see in a sci-fi movie. So most of our Middle Earth life does not even originate from Earth. And there are permanent, if you want to call them bases, if you want to call them, there's Oturan, permanent settlements that are way deep down in the mantle. Our military knows about these settlements. They understand that they're there. They've talked a lot with these off-worlders about, God, how are you living down there, man? It's hot and it's big pressure and you can't breathe. And one of the reasons why these off-worlders placed not like living settlements like, oh, I have a Western expansion mentality. I must go and take my donkey and plow land and kill indigenous people. It's not that kind of settlement, gang. They're more like outposts that those individuals would man like we take military personnel and we stick them in Germany. And they're over there dealing with the Air Force Base, So it's not a military outpost. I really want to be careful how I say that. And I'm getting yelled at by all these angels for my equivocation there. These extraterrestrials do not have military bases in the crust of our Earth. They basically have airports that they maintain because, as we've exhaustively discussed, and I'm trying to cram all this in here, there's a lot of power in the Earth, and they use the Earth as a jump point between other major areas all over the place. So that's the mantle, okay? So then we go past the mantle, and we're getting into the liquid of the Earth or the core of the Earth, okay? And that's 3,200 miles down is the base of the outer core, which is liquid. Now, this is what we think is down there. It's very, very important to tell everyone that even with our exaggerated and badly reversed engineered Dorito spaceships, we can't get down there. We can't get down there. We have done all sorts of satellite imaging. We've done resonance imaging. We've done chemical imaging. We've done hydrogen imaging. We have imaged every single way we know how to be able to look down into the Earth and see what's there. Do we know there's big oceans? Heck yeah. Do we know that there are creatures in them? We most likely do, because they're going to come up as heat signatures or things that are moving underneath the ground. Now, they are so big that I would suppose, as I look into our scientific community, and especially these Black Ops programs, when they were first harvesting this data and taking a look at this, they were looking at some of those giant Titan creatures that I call them Titan creatures down there, and they thought they were pockets of magma that were moving until they recognized that they moved independently, and they don't move very often. And these are such large creatures that they basically just sit down there and absorb what they need to absorb. I mean, it's not a kind of lifestyle that we as surface dwellers who live on the skin of the apple can even begin to understand. We just wouldn't get it, because our need for space, freedom, light, we require sunlight to live. None of the life, and there is sentient life in those Middle Earth caverns. And there are types of humanoid beings, but again, not way down there. The types of the humanoid beings are mostly hanging out down to about 430 miles in the asthenosphere and the lithosphere, which is 60 miles down. That's where we're going to find, when you have the fantasy movies that cavemen got trapped or whatever, there are a few hominids that over time have been separated off and got, a few of them have been able to branch off and live, but they are non-recognizable to people like you and I. Those hominids are very different. They haven't had sunlight for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. They have a different makeup. Their body is a lot more gelatinous. It takes sunlight and it takes a lot of nutrients and minerals to maintain a skeletal system. And calcium is a really weird thing in the body. So these beings have mutated into something that we wouldn't recognize as a person. And they have certainly recognized, gone into their own society. We would see them as monsters. They would probably look a lot more like orcs if we were to look at them, kind of slimy and weird and gelatinous. And they just have a very different type of body. But not all hominids died on the surface. Some got trapped below, and some died off. Some figured out how to keep going. And over thousands of years of breeding, you get some pretty weird stuff down there. So our idea of Middle Earth, with the pretty beautiful gardens and the, trapped whatevers down there, that's not exactly what's down there. It looks a little more like a horror movie or a deep sea expedition or another planet with these huge crystal caverns. And again, there are the ecosystems that we would find that we think of Middle Earth stuff. You can find them in deep caves, but they're still in the crust of the earth. We're not talking going way down, okay? So now we're going all the way down. We're going down to the outer core of the earth, and that's about 3,200 miles down. So that 3,200 miles down it's an outer core, and it's nickel and it's iron, and it's swirling around, and we think it's all just, magma and liquid and stuff. And it is. Yet it was very interesting. On Patreon here, there are many levels to which you can subscribe. And the top level, or I shouldn't even call it the top level, but the highest level of subscription is it's a subscription. I think it's $55 a month. And once a month, I jump on to the subscribers and we talk about whatever those subscribers want to talk about. And a lot of times I get messages from angels. We go into a Facebook chat. We go into chats where these questions can come forward and I can speak in real time to the people in the group. And we talk about whatever they want to talk about. It's really, really cool. And I love our monthly chats. And it came up on this last monthly chat as we were doing a meditation, and I was being given a meditation by these angels to do this meditation for our Mother Earth. And we were sending energy and Reiki all the way down through the earth to the core of the earth. And of course, when I was in chorus with these other subscribers, and these are very powerful human beings, my God, we went right to the core of the earth and I could see the flipping core. And the core of the earth, the very, very core, the very inner core, okay? We detect iron and nickel and sulfur, creating that deep, rigid inner core that science believes is compressed into a ball because all of the pressure that's above it. And the only thing I could find when I went to the core of the earth, are you ready for this? Was a freaking vortex. A giant, huge, freaking vortex right in the center of the planet. And it was literally sucking in electromagnetic energy and outputting electromagnetic energy. And this vortex, I want you to think of like a black hole, kind of. It wasn't a black hole, but it was this vortex that was created by the pressure and the types of metals that are, it wasn't just a big solid core. It was these materials, but within it was this moving liquid vortex. And what seemed solid was a steady state of matter transference. This is literally what I saw in the core of the earth. I about fell off my chair. And I said to the subscribers, I'm like, guys, it looks like the middle of the earth is actually a vortex. I mean, yes, I see solidity, and I see iron and nickel and sulfur. Yet all of those amazing components with the liquid that's the outer core, which is that liquid iron and nickel swirling around it, okay? We've got this massive vortex that's literally driving the entire planet. It's insane. And I don't know what came first, the vortex and the planet formed, or if the planet formed and opened a vortex. Now, that I don't know. But what it looks like, okay, these angels are telling me it was kind of a perfect balance the whole time. So again, it's not a hollow center, it's a solid center. But I want you to think, you know what else is really solid? A black hole is really solid. I'm not saying that we have a singularity in the center of the earth. What I'm saying is clear down to the bottom in the inner core. And I mean, we stop even calling it anything fancy anymore. You know, because we have the outer crust, the lithosphere, the asthenosphere, the mesosphere. Then it's just outer core and inner core. Because we have no freaking clue. We don't have a clue. We barely know what's in the mesosphere, okay? And that's the one that goes down to 1,800 miles below the surface. So the outer core and the inner core, we have this massive vortex system, and really the inner core is a giant vortex. Yes, it's solid, but I want you to think about matter that is constantly moving, like particle matter that can slip between itself. And there is a massive amount of pressure in the middle of the planet of Earth. Yet that planetary pressure there has it's ripped open a space-time wormhole. It's ripped open a piece into space. Because you have to remember what Earth is. Earth is a giant spinning electromagnet. And some of the largest electromagnetic fields or magnetic fields that are detected in space are on the outer rims or the outer singularity of a black hole. And we can't really get close enough to that because by the time you get detecting that energy, you're sucked in and it's all downhill from there, and we don't even know what happens to you. You just get compressed into nothingness and probably spit out the other side somewhere else with a white hole. Yet, again, I want to be very careful to say, I'm not saying there's a black hole in the middle of the earth. What I'm saying, however, is there is a pressure vortex that is created simultaneously by this perfect storm of layers of massive 25-story crystals, of huge electromagnetic conducting materials such as iron that are swirling around in a liquid format, all right? Just lots of liquid there. And it's fascinating when you get a chance to see how much this moves. You know, I mean, and literally, they theorize, the science community theorizes that the inner core of the earth, is about 800 miles in diameter, and it's supposedly composed of, like they say, more than 90% iron with a maximum density of, 13 grams for every cubed centimeter. So it's pretty dense. And it says, I'm reading this actually off of a science journal. This iron in this layer, although very, very hot, is solid due to immense pressure at the center of the earth. Now, I get that it's solid, but I also get those particles are passing through one another. So they can be solid or they can move open, just depending on whatever's going on with this movable vortex. It's surrounded by layers and layers of electromagnetic and conductive materials. So then they talk about the outer core, and they're saying about 1,240 miles thick. The outer core is also made mostly of iron with a density of about 10 grams per, basically every cubed centimeter. So it's dense. However, a reduction in pressure makes this hot layer a liquid. And it is liquidy down there. And really, there's really nothing living in that. It's just magma. It's lava. It's a molten, bloppy mess with this glowing, center that is a vortex that you can actually pass in and out of if you have the proper technology, which is one of the reasons why I want you to think of like a giant broadcast center in the core of the earth that is fueling every single vortex system on the center of the earth. And if you think the Bermuda Triangle is huge, if you think that the electromagnetic energy in Sedona is huge, you guys, gang, that is thousands of miles up on the surface. Can you imagine what that electromagnetic pressure feels like in the center? This is why in the center of the earth, Middle Earth, the very middle of the earth, is a space-time wormhole opportunity rather than a living environment, okay? And they talk about the mantle, which is where a lot of these creatures live and a lot of the underground oceans and whatnot is, that I've been shown. And it says the mantle is about 1,860 miles thick. The mantle is made of iron and magnesium-rich silicate rocks, and it's not as dense. It has a density of 4.5 grams for every cube centimeter. The mantle is hot, but mostly solid because the minerals are under pressure. Well, it's solid except for the giant pockets of gaseous stuff where you have all of these crystal caverns and these underground oceans. Some of them are salt, some of them are brackish, some of them are clear water, very clear water. So, then we're going back up. We're going to the asthenosphere. And it says the upper reaches of the mantle are not solid. They are considered plastic and flow very slowly. This is due to the reduction in pressure. As we approach the top of the mantle, the rocks are more likely to begin to melt. So it's one of those deals where, again, they're talking about plastic and they think of it like a goo. But again, we do have these caverns in there and the hot places, just like we talked about, where we have a lot of these extraterrestrial craft that come and go. So it's pretty fascinating, and they talk about the asthenosphere, which is the 430 miles down. We have a lot of caverns with lava flowing through there. That's where Yellowstone Park parks a lot of its lava in that asthenosphere. And even it says here, the upper reaches of the mantle are not solid. They are considered plastic and flow very slowly. This is due to the reduction in pressure. As we approach the top of the mantle, the rocks are more likely to begin to melt. And that sounds a lot like our mantle section, right, that we just read. So basically, they're kind of guessing on these two layers, which I don't know why I think that's so funny. And so when we talk about the lithosphere, which is about 60 miles down, and we still are trying to drill, we're trying to drill for oil there. We're trying to, not all the way down for 60 miles, but we're trying to drill there. That's where we have the brackish water problems. We're trying to dump a lot of our toxic stuff there. When we talk about the lithosphere, it says this layer varies in thickness from 1 to 250 miles. The lithosphere is a cool, strong, and rigid layer. Its uppermost part is called the crust and is divided into oceanic and continental type crust discussed in the next section. So, we park a lot of, again, if you go to Yellowstone Park, that is when they talk about 1 mile, the thickness is 1 mile. There are parts of the earth crust in Yellowstone Park that are so thin that you'll just break right through it. So there's lots of spots that are thinner than 1 mile. And now that we have so many people coming through Yellowstone Park, one of these days, somebody who's not staying on the boardwalk as they requested are just going to crack right through there and just fall down and, we can ask them what's in the middle of the earth. So is there a Middle Earth societies? Yes. Do they look like what we think they look like? No. Do they have, beings that could exist on the top of the earth living in big caverns underground? Not what we would consider in the middle of the earth, not in the mantle. No, you do have some trapped beings and beings that have evolved in that very, very upper crust area in that lithosphere. However, they are few and far between. We do have weird semi-prehistoric beings that have gone farther down into the earth, where they're thinking it's more like this plasticky stuff that's down there, or it moves slowly. Again, there are solid pockets down there. And so we've got these beings that exist down there, but not hobbits, gang. I'm sorry. There's no hobbits in the middle of the earth. Now, what we think of as fae or fairies or extra-dimensionals or intra-dimensionals, they do live dimensionally right next to us. And that more is what we have romanticized or called Middle Earth. Okay, so there are these fairy realms. There are these fae realms. There is a Brigadoon, so to speak. There are these places that, because now that you've gotten the big geology breakdown about what's actually below the earth and what's there and why the extraterrestrials go there, now you understand why we have so many swirling vortexes on the skin of the earth or on the crust or on the apple skin. And I want you to think about the crust of the earth as the top of a wide meandering river. I live right by the last undammed river in the lower 48 states, and it's the Yellowstone River. And it is the mighty Yellowstone that plummets thousands of feet on its journey from Yellowstone Park to meet the Missouri River. And what's fascinating about the Yellowstone is because it is undammed, it actually has its own ecosystem that is intact for a river system. And we've really ruined our river systems all over the place. And what does this have to do with Middle Earth? Well, I'm getting there. So the ecosystem of the Yellowstone River, as we watch it meander, you'll look at the river and sometimes it looks like it's moving kind of slowly. Yet you'll look at the top of the river and you'll see those little spinning eddies, those little current swirls. Have you ever seen those on top of a river? And the river's moving, but there's tons of those little current swirls. And you think, wow, well, this would be kind of a good place to swim. Well, the problem is you never want to swim where there's lots of little eddies, because that is a sign that there's a lot of deadfall underneath the water. And where there's deadfall, there's oxygen that gets trapped. And when the oxygen gets trapped, it releases bubble pockets. And when you swim above that and you encounter a pocket of bubbles, then your buoyancy disappears completely and you sink to the bottom of the river and you get trapped because you're too heavy to push yourself off of the bunch of creepy wood that now the pressure of the river has you trapped against. You can't push yourself off from that because there's no buoyancy in the water and you drown. So why am I talking about eddies in a river? Because I want you to think about the vortexes on the surface of the earth as eddies. We just see these little swirly vortexes open on the very top of the apple skin. Yet we are completely non-comprehending the depth below us or how deadly the stuff below us actually is. Because all we see are the little swirls. And we think the swirls in Sedona and the swirls at Stonehenge and the swirls at Lake Titicaca are the power. Yet they're not. They are indicative of great power below, okay? So when we want to think Middle Earth and we want to think all of these different beings and our hobbits and our fairies and our wizards and all of this, that is a discussion for another podcast, and that is the Fae realm and the extra-dimensional or multiverses that actually exist very, very close to our own universe, our own third-dimensional pathway, and they exist so close to us for every single reason I have laid out here today. For every single reason, because our planet is a massive electromagnet that can poke holes in space-time and whose core is a hole in space-time. So we have a really intense planet that opens us up for a ton of discussion about extra-dimensional and interdimensional and multiverse universes. And that's going to be our next podcast. So there you go. So now you can chew on this for a while. So next time you watch Lord of the Rings, think, ooh, fairy ring, not ooh, Middle Earth, caverns. Now that's got more gelatinous, weird, orky-looking things that I just won't talk about them. I sound like I'm slagging on them. They can't help it. They've been down there for thousands and thousands of years. So there you go. All right, gang, we're at our time, and I do want to give a quick shout out. I've got a couple of events coming up at the end of October of 2019. One of those events, October 18th and 19th, I'm going to be actually leading a ghost hunt with my very dear super bestie pal, and you will know her as a guest I have on the show all the time, Melissa Siana. She's an herbalist. She's a healer. She's also actually the production manager for Road Angel. So she's a lot of things, and Melissa is a Bridger, Montana resident. So we are going to be doing 2-hour-long haunted Bridger ghost hunts in actual haunted basements of these old West Town locations. And we've got very limited tickets for these, actually about 20 people a group, gang, because these old West Towns have very small basements. And so if you want to check that out, you can go to the events section on my website. And we made it like stupid affordable because we just wanted to create a fun event where I could do some ghost hunting with people and do some translating for some spirits and get people out from behind their devices that they're looking down. So check that out. That's October 18th and 19th. And again, that's in 2019 if you're listening to this podcast at a different time. And you can get those tickets right there for the Haunted Bridger Ghost Hunt. And tickets do include hot mulled cider and hot mulled wine. So check that out. And you have 2 choices of times to choose from, 7 to 9 or 10 o'clock to midnight. We're running 2 tours a night. So see if you want to come and hang out with us. It'd be a lot of fun. We just dork out and hunt ghosts. It's a lot of fun. Learn a little history. And Melissa's going to tell us all about what kind of herbs you can use this time of year that can actually keep you protected from things that actually do go bump in the night. And there are some. It's a thing. And then also, I have another event coming up on the 26th of October. It is my annual Really Scary Things Walking Among Us Halloween Forum and the Classroom series at Barjan's Books in Billings, Montana. And if you're anywhere near Billings, you're going to want to try to get to that one because I get an opportunity to debrief about some of the most terrifying stuff that I've run into this year and how I've dealt with it. And it's not to scare people. It's actually to let people know that anything that is in our third dimension is handleable and how to handle it and how to do it safely and not jeopardize yourself or other people. So you can find those tickets are $45 and the ghost hunt tickets are $25. Again, we're just keeping this affordable for folks because we're trying to spread the love and the knowledge. And that is all I know, gang. So those are all the announcements. That is our podcast about what's actually in Middle Earth. Thank you for hanging in there, subscribers, and thank you for being patient with my television production schedule. I'm not going to lie. It's a bit of a dance to try to figure out how to get this all through the keyhole, but we're starting to get a system dialed in. It's fantastic. And we're going in to do some Road Angel production, as a matter of fact, in the middle of October. So I'm excited to get back into the TV production swing with everything. And as soon as I can let y'all know, yes, I will, where Road Angel is airing, I will let you know. We can't say yet. So anyway, gang, thank you very much. Have a fantastic week. And remember, if it's a hobbit, it's interdimensional. Everybody, take care, and I'll see you next week.